Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined here by Dvija again, this time in person.
Yes, hello. Yeah.
And we're going to talk about AI in art. So AI in aesthetics, AI generated images, AI generated songs, AI generated poems. All these things are becoming increasingly possible and also increasingly better and actually beautiful. The question that we can begin with, though, is in which way are they beautiful? Are they genuinely beautiful? Is there something superficial, artificial about them? Or could we speak of true beauty? What would you say about this? What would be different about them?
So, well, the first thing I think we should be considering is what exactly is aesthetically beautiful. Well, throughout the years, many philosophers have tried to answer this question. People like Kant and Hume, and there's so many modern philosophers who also tried to answer this. And it's interesting to know how everyone has a slightly different definition
Right.
of what is truly beautiful or aesthetic.
Obviously,
But,
yeah.
well, there's a common denominator, which is to say that some sort of beautiful art or aesthetic art would be something that is a potentially novel or just a novel creation. That's something new, something authentic, created by an artist, which also has value.
Okay.
And value would be measured in terms of many subjective
Right.
domains, right?
There's a lot of difficulty with the definitions
God,
you give,
yeah.
right? Value, I mean, value could be also market value, right? So,
Anything, yeah.
like, songs are more
Right.
valuable if they sell more, for example.
Yeah.
In some measures.
So, I mean, I think the easiest thing for me to say in this video is what exactly I think of what is beautiful or aesthetic. And so when we talk of these, this like AI generated art, the question is of whether if it's truly, genuinely beautiful. And firstly, it's important to note that something that is aesthetic and beautiful should be something that has the ability to generate or put into action feelings or emotions of sublimity or overwhelmingness, maybe, you know.
Okay.
That could be one of the criteria for something to be truly genuinely beautiful.
Okay. So would you say that there is such a thing as an everyday superficial beauty? Like some sort of, like, patterns. Patterns are often not new, but like
Right.
people still decorate churches and buildings with repeating patterns, and when you
Right.
see them, you would say they're beautiful to some
Yeah.
extent, right?
So even with beauty, there's like status, right? I don't know who says this. I think it's either Kant in his critique of pure reason of aesthetics, and so he says that it is, I think, the good, the beautiful, and the sublime.
Okay.
So like everyday things would fall under the good or beautiful category. When I talk of the sublime, that's just the sublime is like, oh, when you go and look at the ocean and you have this like overwhelming feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is art like that, which
Right.
is different. But if we just talk of the good and the beautiful, like you said, like, oh, you know, buildings that are made beautifully, or just sort of a sketch made by someone, could be beautiful.
Right.
And so I would say that, yeah, superficially on the level of not really going deeper into how the art is created or the process of creativity. And if we just look at like AI generated art, I think it would be to an extent beautiful if the spectator feels as if, you know, it kind of matches their subjective notion of beauty.
Right. But would you now? I take it from this that AI art would still lack the capability of the sublime. So, because what do you mean by that? Let's say this one recent artwork that won the prize won an art prize, which was AI generated and caused controversy. It has something mystical about it. I don't know if I saw it for the first time, like printed on a canvas. I don't know if I'd call it sublime, but there is something that strikes us as new, even if it's generated out of existing data. Would you say that it's less sublime or not capable of being sublime, or is it hard to answer?
So when I had like my first look at this particular painting, if I hadn't known it was AI generated, if I thought that an artist actually sat and imagined this, thought of this, and created this, it was definitely something definitely beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like when you say mystical, I feel like, oh yeah, there was like this ethereality to it.
Right, yeah.
But it's also because of, I think, the theme that was picked. And then later when I realized that it's an AI generated piece, I don't remember the AI system, but I think it's something similar to the text to image output, like the DALI as well.
Yeah.
So,
It is.
and I also realized that the artist is not willing to kind of disclose what was the phrase used to create it, right?
Just the title of the image is like something like the space opera.
Right, yeah. And it's definitely beautiful, but I would say that the sublime, the sublime means having intense feelings of overwhelmingness, feeling like, oh, like, like sometimes you get the shiver in the back of your spine.
Mm-hmm.
It's something like that. I don't know. Maybe someone felt that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very subjective notion. But again, I would say when we talk of it from like the philosophy of aesthetics point of view, I think a lot of it is directed towards why an artist creates, or the process that they take to create, and these things entail a lot of the sublimity, the beauty, the elements of these things. And if we just look at it from the spectator's point of view, yeah, I would say that AI art, if like created by the right tools and with like an artist controlling that sort of a system, it could maybe generate something that's sublime. I'm not saying it couldn't.
Right.
It could, but it depends so much on the artist who is kind of controlling it or giving it its inputs or commands.
Okay, so you'd say, just in the same way that these systems are dependent on input of art in order to output it, they are somehow still dependent on humans in some way. Like in an interview with the New York Times, the artist, quote unquote artist, said in the end that art is dead pretty much. Machines have won, humans have lost. Pretty harsh statement in a way to a lot of artists, I'd say. But like there's something to it where like people have argued this with the end of with the invention of the camera, that art would be dead after that. However, art didn't die, it just transformed. I suppose realistic paintings, realistic portraits kind of became less popular, obviously, because cameras could do the job much faster and better. However, art became more expressionist, impressionist, like the transition to modern art happened. Whereas even then, especially people with like more traditional aesthetics, would argue that something has actually been lost after the invention of the camera. Like it's still lost in a sense, that modern art has become a bit more hollow and a bit less coherent in a sense. You get these like at the same time we're in philosophy, you get this deconstructionist attitude. You get in art also this sort of deconstruction. Right. You look at Picasso's paintings and they're kind of bizarre in some way, without negatively judging his work. I'm just saying it's different to art before. And I was wondering, what would you think? What is happening? What would happen to art after this? What will happen to art once you can tell an AI to develop something and it does it in a few seconds, what an artist would take hours, days, weeks for?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is that the beauty of aesthetics and the beauty of art is also kind of its rarity. I mean, anything in life, the more like, if you get used to something a lot, you forget its importance. The reason why diamonds are rare, I mean, why they're beautiful is because they're rare. And and even with art, like you said, like artists take hours to create something. And I would say that, yeah, of course, there's like every day new art pieces come out, new artworks come out, artists create things. Right. But just imagine a world where we just have AI creating everything for us. it would become monotonous. It would become just something that's not rare. It would be something that would, everyone would see it, all the time. And so then it will kind of lose its rarity.
Right.
So, well, that's going to change art if a day like that comes. But I do think that the whole human level of creative intelligence is still different than what AI has been able to do right now, and will probably take time to get there for several factors, for several reasons. And so when we talk of this like transformation in art, of course, like with the way like time goes on, different notions of subjectivity change in people. What people think was aesthetic like 100 years ago has probably changed now.
Yeah.
Like, wow, you spoke about Picasso, right? Like maybe like 400 years ago that would have not been something that some like people considered aesthetic. And
yeah,
then,
they wouldn't call it
right?
art, maybe.
Yeah. So I feel like with the way that people's subjective understandings of aesthetics also change, art will change just like everything else in the world changes. But with the whole AI creativity wave, I don't think that art is dead, because I still truly believe that there's something different about the way that humans create art than AI does. Yeah.
Right. What would be that difference? It's hard for me to conceptualize. I would make an attempt at saying there is a necessity of some sort of openness. Like I see a similarity to, if you want to describe what humor is, right? Perhaps you could get an AI to and feed it with loads of funny jokes, which is very subjective, but like feed it loads of funny jokes and perhaps could create jokes or something like that. However, there is a notion, I forgot who formulated it, but that humor is in its essence not really formalizable. You cannot find a recipe that will always be funny.
Right.
You can find something, and perhaps it's the same with art, where you kind of the saying that it's art in its original sense that an AI produces implies a sort of measurability, right? And implies it does away with any sort of aesthetic values or aesthetic essentialism, but and focuses more on some sort of statistical properties of beauty, right? So if something, there's these common ones like symmetry, like something is symmetric, we perceive symmetric faces as beautiful. However, you'll always find exceptions, right? You always find exceptions, and sometimes it's exactly the fact that they fall out of this template, that they fall out of symmetry, and yet somehow manage to be beautiful, that creates the beauty, right? It's sometimes, especially in music, it's not that everything always harmonizes that creates a beautiful piece. It's that it somehow manages to disharmonize and somehow in the big scheme represent a harmony, right? Like you sometimes take songs and you just take its individual chords or individual passages and you find they sound off, but you listen to the whole thing and it's a beautiful piece. And I think, perhaps you have a closed system. If you have an AI trained with art and when no new art comes out, it's a closed system. Let's take the AI that can write Bach music. So Bach's music would change if he got divorced, if he lost his child, if he, he lost some weight, I don't know, if he got rich suddenly. All these things which have nothing directly to do with music would influence his music, right? Whereas the Bach AI can only write songs that Bach has in the style of what Bach has already written, right?
Right, yeah.
So this probably ties into the idea of general intelligence and consciousness, in the sense that you can integrate something that has nothing to do with music, even unconsciously, it's not even happening consciously. Could you expand on that? What would you think? What would you think in this case?
So I would say that I am probably the biggest proponent for saying that consciousness, or sort of phenomenal consciousness, is necessary to create this sort of human level creative art. So what I do want to stress on is that when I talk of human level, it does not mean that it's just something humans are entitled to.
Mm-hmm.
It is just a word I use to explain in easier terms,
Mm-hmm.
For everyone to understand what this sort of level means for creative intelligence. And so
You mean human level whenever you say something has human level creative intelligence?
I'm not saying
you're
that
saying
it's
that
just,
as a benchmark, not that like
not
humans
that,
are some
for
Okay.
sure. It's just a
Exclusive,
benchmark that
okay.
we may reach at one point in artificial intelligence, which
Mhm.
maybe we can hope to.
Right.
So what I would firstly like to say is that there's definitely like different levels of creative intelligence.
Mhm.
Okay, all coming from maybe you and I having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We're not creating art, but this is still considered creative intelligence. Us
Mhm.
like generating new sentences,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
are novel. We're not using these sentences from somewhere else. They're novel sentences that we've created. We're talking.
Yeah, agreed.
Also, like maybe writing a paper, philosophy paper.
Yeah.
That's also to an extent some sort of creative intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we look at like systems like DALL-E, they have like the ability to like coalesce this different information and
Yeah.
then create an output. So that is also some sort of creative intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it is different from what I talk of when I talk of human level. Why I say this is because what this human level intelligence kind of entails is that a I really like to focus on the consciousness bit in this area
Mm-hmm.
because we do know for a fact right now that artificial systems are not sentient and not conscious. Various other neuroscientists.
Can you explain quickly why do we know that?
Why do we know that? Well,
quick explanation.
Based on all the research that's been done, a lot of leading neuroscientists and philosophers have made the claim that they are not conscious yet because they don't have a sense of self-identity in
Mhm.
this in this natural world. They don't understand that there's something that's like to be them.
Okay.
They don't have self-awareness or introspective abilities yet, and so that kind of is a very simple explanation.
Okay, and that is how did they arrive at that conclusion? Like if you take a chatbot, you could probably have a chatbot that like conveys some sort of
Right.
simulation of being self-aware. Like
Yeah.
how do they, what is their reason to conclude that?
So basically, there's many theories of consciousness, and a few of them are computational theories, which kind of try to explain consciousness in computational terms.
Right.
And if we are to even apply these theories to these systems, since computationally they could match, and maybe that can
Right.
give us an answer,
Mhm.
they still don't truly do justice to whatever even this particular theory says. Like,
Right.
there's two main theories called the global workspace theory and the integrated information theory.
Right.
And so both of these theories, even if we apply these to AI, they're not there yet.
Right. And they are like the, let's say,
The leading
experimentally leading kind
Yeah.
of theories. The others are kind of more tentative,
theories. Right.
the way I understood
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And like when we talk the Turing test, I don't think it's more like a measure of consciousness. It's more like just seeing if a machine can pass as a human, right? So that's not an exact, I would say, like, conclusion to say anything is conscious or sentient.
Sure. I mean,
Right.
exact conclusions are currently very difficult.
Yeah. Very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we know that for sure for now.
Mhm.
And so, the main answer is like to the question of what exactly is consciousness.
Yeah.
To make it very simple, I'll just say that the essence of kind of being conscious is to have a subjective experience or to know that there's something it is like
Mhm.
for me to be me or for you to be you.
Right.
And there's something it is like for a bat to be a bat,
Right,
as
right.
Nagel puts it.
And self-identity, is that a necessary criteria? Is there consensus on that? Because I don't have much input on this, but one of my inputs is obviously Henry Shevlin, and I got the feeling he's not too
Yeah.
sure whether self-identity is required, right?
So again, when we talk of consciousness, there's like various parameters that so many, researchers have put forward, like awareness, ability to create mental representations, self-awareness, self-identity, or, kind of also like just knowing that there's something it is like for one to exist in like this spatio-temporal realm. There's like a lot of obviously cognitive factors involved as well, and also like these sort of more like phenomenological factors involved as
Right.
well. And so it's a very blurry line out there. We really don't know. And so when people ask the question of, oh, what is it to be conscious? Well, we just don't know.
Right.
So yeah.
I see. Yeah, okay, it's difficult to come to conclusions with these things. Why exactly, can you explain a bit further why you would say that creativity,
Right.
or the
Yeah.
capability of art is tied to consciousness, and
Right.
what role does it play? So like there's different you can always interpret things from the lens of different theories, and there's people that make some sort of evolutionary attempt, right? Would say like, yeah, it's somehow, there's perhaps some
Yeah.
evolutionary benefit to art, something like that.
Right.
Some people would argue like, yeah, the how should you say, the pleasure of some sort of structured patterns, of recognizing structured patterns, is something that helps develop our visual cortex, our visual system, our visual perceptive capabilities. So arguably, our brain is constantly not just perceiving but also creating the world in a way. Like it takes us a while. We are not born with a full 3D understanding. It takes a while until our brain kind of seems to, or locate us in a space where things are closer and further away, and all this is actual cognitive workings. And perhaps we kind of acquire these skills by seeking some sort of visual complexity. This is a very scientific attempt at explaining these things, and because it uses established theories of biology, things like that may give off the impression that they are like more rigorous, more true. However, I don't always know. Would you be more in this kind of camp that also often correlates with people that would speak of consciousness as something that in its last essence is somehow mysterious? And in the same sense, you could say that like art in its last essence is mysterious. Evolution, just talking about trying to survive is not enough. Survival is something that an animal does that is in dire needs of survival, and that's about to die. But art is something that the animal or the human strives to when he's not currently trying to survive. It is something that goes beyond this rational explanation.
So, well, the first thing I would like to say is that what the point you made about how an animal is in the dire need to survive. We're not in that position. We've kind of through evolution completely moved past that now. We're at a stage where we're not just living to survive. We're living to kind of truly live. The reason why we built all these things around us, we have all these books around us, right? Yeah, that's not for survival. It's just for the quest for knowledge, the quest for knowing more. It's humans have kind of known that they don't know everything and that there is more to know.
Right.
And so when it comes to consciousness and art, it's also something that, well, we don't know everything about, but we would like to know more about. It's not about evolution or survival. It's just about the quest for knowing more, the quest for knowledge. And it's rewarding if we find an answer to these questions. Maybe we will someday. Like maybe like 1,000 years from 1,000 years before from now, we didn't even know that we would have like artificial systems.
Right.
Well, we do now, and now it's like up to us to see how we take it forward. But the reason why I kind of emphasize on like why consciousness or phenomenal consciousness is important to this sort of creative intelligence is to talk about how even with like the rise of AI, creativity and everything, it does not mean that human art is dead, because we do have like a step above the AI systems, because there is something different it is like to be us than to be them. Um, Mainly because the systems, they're more like, they're good at interpolating information. They're intelligent in the sense that they know what information to pick out, what to not. They're programmed in that way. And for sure, like in terms of intelligence, they can go far ahead. But when it comes to things like truly understanding an experience and creating from that, may it be in the form of like catharsis for an artist, or the form of just having to portray something in a physical means that we may not be able to kind of talk about, just because it's this sort of subjective experience. So, well, let me also talk about how one of like a famous philosopher, Margaret Bowden, who has also been into AI and creativity and philosophy of, aesthetics and all of that. She talks about how there's like 3 types of creativity: combinational, exploratory, and transformational.
Okay. Combination excellent. Okay.
Right. So combinational is simply about like, having a lot of information and just combining it together, like drawing metaphors or motifs, for example. Right?
There's a notion in Kant, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, that aesthetics in his sphere is seen as something that enables us to regard many separate elements as a whole.
Right.
That like you get like,
yeah,
it's when you see a beautiful face, you don't sum up a beautiful mouth plus a beautiful nose plus a beautiful eye, right?
Right.
It's the aesthetic,
Yeah.
the aesthetic that enables us to see things as a whole, and in a way it is what holds together groups as well of humans. Like you rarely, I just say, when you take something like an identity with a nation, regardless of if that's a good or bad thing, but like if you have some sort of identity with some nation or religion, or some people, you don't see them as like, yes, my nation is the 35 million people that live in this area. You don't have this notion of this plus this plus this is my. You have a more aesthetic idea. My nation is like our people, and it's like some sort of historical myth, right? It's usually some historical myth, or same with a religion, it's some historical myth that is like it is a form of art, right? It is a singular thing you cannot just dissect.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, continue.
No, that's good. And when we talk of even exploratory art, it's also like exploring different domains and again coalescing information to sort of produce something. Like the Dali, I think, uses this sort of a creativity base, exploratory, because it's like got exposure to like so many frames and images. And then when you put in an input, it kind of explores through its diffusion model and coalesces this together to produce something. Right. And when we talk of transformational, it's talking about producing art novelly in a completely different domain. Like, for example, when Impressionism came into being. Before Impressionism, nobody knew what it was.
Yeah.
Until like one day it was just like, oh well, there we have Impressionism. So that day when it kind of came out, that would have been like transformational.
I see.
And so that's a really hard thing to do, to kind of like create something that doesn't exist at all. But humans have the capability of kind of doing that, to create these novel things.
Right.
And so what Bowden has said, that till now AI can only explore can only display the exploratory kind of creative intelligence, creativity, and hasn't reached the stage of even getting into these 2 other domains. And so that brings me to my argument that I have been building up for so long, which is what I call the what it is likeness argument. Which is an argument for human level creative intelligence and why it requires phenomenal consciousness. So firstly, I would like to say that the sort of human level creative intelligence I've been talking about, it obviously means that a person is creating something out of a subjective experience, creating something novel or potentially novel and valuable, and which has come into existence because of an experience that they've had, or they're channeling this sort of understanding. So, what I would like to say is that human level creative intelligence requires an understanding of an experience. Requiring an understanding of an experience means that you need to understand the what it is likeness of a certain subjective experience, which is nothing but being phenomenally conscious.
Right.
Because being phenomenally conscious entails that, you know, you understand the what it is likeness of a particular experience.
Okay.
So it's very simple. It just means that to truly understand an experience, you need to have a subjective, you know, notion of it. You need to have like this feeling in your inner life. There's something it is like to have that. For example, if you go ahead and look at a sunset, okay,
Right.
and you're placed with like 3 other artists, right, and you're all meant to kind of create some sort of art out of this, it's unlikely that you're going to create the exact same thing.
Right.
If it was 3 different AI systems, maybe they would create the same thing. Okay, but when I'm talking about these human artists, it's quite unlikely you'll create the same exact thing, because when you look at the sunset, you're gonna have this different sort of subjective experience. It may give rise to like memories, feelings, emotions, whatever it is. You'll have micro experiences that together link. You'll have this whole intensely perceptual experience of it, mainly.
Yeah.
So will the other 2 artists. And you'll kind of draw upon what, you know, what it is like to feel like the sublimeness of the sunset, I would say.
Right. Yeah.
You will draw upon that and create something out of it. It may not even be exactly what you see. You may tweak it and you'll change things about it, because that's maybe how your mind works as an artist. And so you end up creating something potentially novel.
Right.
And so do the other artists.
I see. So, if I understand you correctly, the what it is likeness, as you call it, is not just a pure perception, but it is the perception plus X plus something extra. And this something extra is necessary as a kind of origin or source for art, as an inspirational ground for art. Is that roughly...
Yeah, that's roughly it. But also this particular type of art, because I don't want to say that it's necessary for all types of creative intelligence.
Right.
I'd like to be very specific about that.
Okay.
Because, of course, like I mentioned, there's different types of creative intelligence. But this sort of is kind of like, it goes hand in hand with the aesthetics of sublimity and beautiful and these sort of things. And I think this is kind of, you know, something that humans have the ability to do, because simply, not just simply, but like just because they are conscious, rather phenomenally conscious. Right. And
I see. Okay, interesting. So if we circle back then to the question of, you know, AI in art and machines in art, what is it? So it is, in the end, this kind of unknown X that enables a perception to be not merely a perception, but also a what it is like to, etc., etc. Machines kind of lack this, and it's not exactly necessarily clear how you would be even able to implement it in a machine, because it seems like something that's like almost in its very essence, or in its very definition, not systematic, and its very definition not something that can be systematized in the very sense where you say that art is more, or needs to be more than just the statistical average of what we find appealing to the eye, you know. And especially nowadays there's this kind of it's becoming, I find, more and more popular to have this art of revolt, this art of insurrection, you know, where you have like, there's an essay by Nick Land called Art as Insurrection. It's oftentimes it is grotesque and ugliness that is art in a sense, and they're, I would just say, conservative or traditionalist aesthetics, they have a point when they say that that's not beautiful, you know, that it's off-putting, but then again, it seems to be some sort of outlet, some sort of symptom, right? It seems to be off-putting on purpose for a particular reason. It seems to try and break with something, break with the idea of beauty, because it has become something oppressive in a way, because you have some idea of beauty and then you have a machine that can do it much better than you. You have you invent this, and then you have some industrial production, some machine. You can see AI maybe as within that history of industrialization, industrial production, you know, you spend hours to build a beautiful furniture, spend years to learn how to make it, and then a factory can make 10 of them in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Right? And so in that sense, maybe art retains its place as this sort of revolt, but that's not enough for art to flourish, you know. There needs to be some way out of this. There needs to be some way to rediscover beauty and reconquer beauty, and not just always be either something that can be done better by a machine or be always something that's just trying to react and be against the machine. Like, in a way, it's sabotage, you know. You try and you know, if you feed the machine with enough ugly things, the machine will also at some point be bad at art, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, that was a bit...
No, I mean, I think what you were talking about, this whole kind of revolting art, there's, even in aesthetics, there's like the paradox of horror, the paradox of tragedy. Why we find, you know, tragedy or horror or something grotesque also beautiful, or we appreciate it. Maybe we don't find it beautiful, but we appreciate it. It's because, again, of the feelings of what it is likeness that it gives rise to in a spectator, right? And so this is why I link phenomenal consciousness to this sort of creative intelligence. And this is why it's necessary for us to also like kind of see what's there in this link, what more things this sort of relation could bring about in AI creativity and human creativity. I think it, like, you know, lets humans know that, hey, you know, they've still got something that AI doesn't have, and AI can try to, you know, create new art, potentially novel art, and it definitely creates something beautiful. I'm not saying it doesn't. It does. But it does lack this, you know, factor of kind of understanding truly an experience and then creating. It's simply good at coalescing information, taking inputs and generating outputs. And I think art is a lot more than just, you know, taking inputs and generating outputs.
Okay. I think this is a good point to end at.
Yeah.
And I thank you very much for this conversation, and I will see you next time.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much, Dvija.
Good. Oh gosh.